You are here today because something guided you to this moment, and it was not by chance. There are certain moments in life when everything becomes quiet. Your heart slows down. Questions grow louder. Doubt gently settles into your thoughts. Yet deep inside you, in that peaceful place where your deepest truth has always existed, you have already felt the answer. This is one of those rare moments. What you are about to hear is not ordinary advice or empty conversation. It is a meaningful response to the questions you have been silently asking the universe for days, maybe even for weeks, during those quiet moments when no one else could hear your thoughts. Today, you are arriving at the place where your deepest emotions finally meet the reality you have been hoping for. I know you have experienced a connection that reaches beyond logic or easy explanation. Before we go any further, take a second to like this video if you feel this message found you for a reason, because what comes next may explain more than you expected. You have sensed a powerful attraction and a deep connection with someone that cannot easily be described with ordinary words. There were moments when you convinced yourself it was only your imagination. Maybe it was just a wish created by your heart. Maybe it was a dream that helped you escape loneliness for a while. But today I want to tell you something with complete certainty. The love you have felt, the strong energy that moves through you every time this person enters your mind, and the strange feeling that you have known them forever are not simply products of your imagination. They are not random events, and they are not stories your mind invented. Stay with me, because what you hear next could completely change the way you see this connection. There have been meaningful signs appearing throughout your life, quietly pointing you toward a truth you may have been afraid to accept because you feared being hurt again. Today, you will begin to understand why this person truly cares about you. Even if their actions seem confusing right now, your doubts will slowly fade as you recognize the evidence that already exists inside your own heart. It does not matter if you have recently felt a heavy weight inside your chest, or if this person has become quieter, more distant, or harder to understand. I want you to realize that this silence is part of the message itself. Even though it feels painful and confusing today, when the universe brings two souls together, it often does so in a way that the heart recognizes long before the mind understands. That is why you are still here listening. You have been searching for reassurance that comes from something much deeper than ordinary words. Sometimes we try too hard to explain feelings that were never meant to be solved by logic alone. They are meant to be experienced through a deeper awareness. What you are feeling is not madness. It is not anxiety. It is not unhealthy attachment, even if you sometimes wonder if it is. You are simply moving through a process that often comes before experiencing a love that feels greater than ordinary relationships. It is the kind of love that reaches far beyond surface attraction and touches something much deeper inside. Keep watching, because the next part may answer the question that has stayed in your heart for so long. Right now, you are witnessing the beginning of a deep recognition between two souls that seemed connected long before this lifetime. There is something important the universe wants you to understand today. Your doubts are not created by this person's lack of love. They come from emotional wounds that have remained inside you for much longer than you realize. When someone carrying genuine love enters your life with an energy that changes your emotional balance, and with eyes that seem to look straight into your soul, old pain naturally begins to rise. Your inner defenses react because this kind of closeness feels unfamiliar. The soul recognizes the other person almost immediately, as if meeting a reflection that has always existed, someone who arrives to help you grow into a stronger version of yourself. But the mind, shaped by painful experiences and disappointment, starts building walls made of fear, uncertainty, and denial. That is why you have spent so many nights lying awake, asking yourself whether this love is real, whether the other person truly feels the same, or whether you have been believing in something you cannot clearly see. Those questions feel real. The emotions feel real. But sometimes the answers do not appear until you are finally ready to receive them. And what comes next may reveal why everything has unfolded exactly the way it has. Comment 111. If you have been sensing a deep soul link with someone lately, even when you try to step back, shut down your emotions, ignore what you feel, or tell yourself to move on, something inside still brings you back again and again. It is subtle, but extremely strong. Not forceful, not loud, but impossible to fully escape. This is not simple attachment, not ego, and not just hope that refuses to die. It feels deeper than that. Like two energies quietly responding to each other across distance, beyond logic, beyond explanation, beyond what the mind can easily accept. You may have asked for clarity many times. You may have looked for signs in small moments, in silence, in timing, in coincidences that felt too meaningful to ignore. Even then, a part of you may have doubted what you were seeing. But today, something shifts in understanding. You begin to notice that even the smallest moments carry meaning. The quick glance that disappeared too fast. The message that felt simple on the surface but carried emotion underneath. The sudden change in your mood when this person comes into your thoughts. All of these are not random in the way they first appear. Stay with this, because the message is getting deeper. Real love connected at a deeper level does not always speak loudly or clearly at the start. It often arrives in quiet ways, in pauses, in distance, in unspoken energy that fills the space between two people. Sometimes, silence says more than words ever could. And sometimes what is not said carries more weight than any confession. You might feel like you are the only one searching for meaning, but what if the meaning has been there all along, just not fully understood yet? If you feel this, drop a 111 and see how many others feel the same connection. Because what you are experiencing is not confusion without purpose. It is emotion in motion. The uncertainty you feel is not proof that nothing is happening. It is often proof that something inside you is changing. This connection did not enter your life to leave you the same. It came to shift your inner world, to wake up feelings you may have buried, to make you question your understanding of love itself. That is why it feels intense. That is why it feels unfamiliar, and that is why it stays in your thoughts even when you try to move away. This person may seem distant at times, or emotionally unclear, but that does not always reflect the depth of what is unspoken. Sometimes feelings exist without easy expression. Sometimes care shows in subtle ways instead of obvious actions. A soft tone, a respectful distance, a quiet awareness that does not need attention to be real. You might have once believed this connection was fading, that silence meant the end, that distance meant loss. But life does not always work in straight lines. Some connections pause instead of break. Some bonds grow in silence rather than separation. The confusion you feel is not a punishment. It is part of a deeper inner change. When something real begins to form inside you, old fears start to surface. Old doubts return. Old patterns try to protect you. But beneath all of that, something new is forming. Something steadier. Something more grounded than fear. And as time moves forward, what once felt uncertain may begin to make sense in ways you could not see before. The answer you have been looking for has never truly been outside of you. It has always been hidden within the quiet battle between your thinking mind and your deeper inner knowing. If you are ready to understand this clearly, stay with this message until the end. Don't skip this part because it may explain what you've been feeling for so long. The reason you feel confusion, even when something inside you seems certain, comes from an ancient inner conflict. It is the push and pull between your limited thinking patterns and the deeper awareness that already exists within you. This confusion, this emotional noise, this overthinking spiral you sometimes fall into, is not random. It happens because your mind is trying to define something that cannot be fully explained through logic alone. And yet, even through all this uncertainty, a part of you keeps returning to the same inner feeling again and again. It doesn't disappear. It doesn't fully break. It keeps coming back like a quiet truth waiting to be understood. This inner truth often does not match the older beliefs you have carried about love, trust, or emotional safety. One part of you reacts from fear, past pain, and self-protection. That part is your defensive thinking system, and it only wants to keep you safe from being hurt again. So when a deep emotional connection enters your life, that protective part of you immediately becomes alert. It sees risk even where there may be meaning. It whispers warnings. It creates doubts. It builds scenarios of loss before anything has even happened. Meanwhile, another part of you feels something completely different. A calm pull, a quiet recognition, a sense that this connection is not ordinary. This is where the conflict begins, not between you and the other person, but inside your own emotional world. If this is resonating, stay with me, because it goes even deeper than you think. Your protective mind will always try to interpret uncertainty as danger. It reacts quickly. If a message is delayed, it assumes distance. If words are unclear, it assumes rejection. If silence appears, it assumes the connection is fading. This creates anxiety, restlessness, and emotional exhaustion. But your deeper awareness works in a very different way. It does not panic. It does not rush. It feels steady, even in silence. It carries a soft sense of knowing that does not depend on constant proof. Even when doubts rise, this inner calm remains in the background like a quiet foundation. And this is the key difference you must learn to recognize. One voice pushes you into fear and urgency. The other guides you into patience and emotional balance. When you can tell them apart, your entire experience of this connection begins to change. What you are experiencing is not simply confusion about another person. It is also a reflection of your own inner healing process. Old emotional memories can influence how you interpret the present. If you have been hurt before, your protective mind will try to prevent history from repeating itself, even when the current situation is different. This is why you may question feelings that actually carry depth. You are not only reacting to what is happening now, but also to what happened before. And here is the deeper truth. The discomfort you feel is not proof that something is wrong. It is often proof that something inside you is being reshaped. So instead of reacting instantly, observe what is happening within you. Because when fear becomes quiet, clarity begins to speak. The distance you are feeling is not always rejection. It can be a form of emotional self-protection triggered by the intensity of what is being felt inside. In deep connections like this, people often describe a pattern of running and chasing. But the one who seems to run is not always running from you. More often, they are running from their own emotional overwhelm, from feelings that become too strong too quickly, from vulnerability they were never fully prepared to face, from the fear of not being enough for something that feels so meaningful. When emotions rise this fast, the mind tries to regain control by stepping back, by creating space, by going silent, not because care is missing, but because balance feels lost. And if you're still watching this closely, you probably already felt that shift before it was ever explained. This is where many misunderstand the situation. Silence gets mistaken for disinterest. Distance gets interpreted as loss. But in reality, what is happening inside the other person can be far more complex. Old emotional experiences, especially past pain or abandonment, can activate a deep fear of repeating history. So when something powerful enters their life, instead of moving closer, they pause, they withdraw, not to erase the connection, but to understand it in their own way. Meanwhile, the other side often becomes the one who reaches out emotionally, who thinks more, who feels more urgency to fix the gap. This creates a cycle. The more one moves forward emotionally, the more the other steps back to regain control. And this pattern continues until something changes within the energy between both sides. One of the hardest truths to accept is that forcing connection rarely brings closeness. Emotional pressure, even when it comes from love, can feel overwhelming to someone who is already trying to manage intense feelings. That is why chasing can sometimes increase distance instead of reducing it. Not because love is absent, but because the nervous system reacts to pressure by creating space. In contrast, when emotional urgency begins to calm down, something different happens. The energy shifts. The atmosphere feels lighter. The need to control the outcome slowly dissolves. And in that space, clarity begins to form again. This is not about giving up. It is about returning to emotional balance so that connection is not driven by fear, but by calm awareness. There is also a deeper layer to this experience. Separation or distance is not always the end of something. Sometimes it functions like a reset, a pause where both individuals are allowed to process their emotions independently. During this time, old fears begin to surface so they can be understood, not avoided, not suppressed, understood. And as this inner work happens, both sides evolve in ways they may not immediately notice. The purpose of this space is not punishment, it is refinement, a process where confusion slowly turns into understanding and emotional intensity transforms into stability. So instead of seeing this distance as final, it can also be seen as part of a larger unfolding, one that only becomes clear when the emotional noise settles and both hearts find their own balance again. The distance you are feeling is not always rejection. It is often a form of inner self-protection triggered by the intensity of emotions that get activated in this kind of bond. In deeply emotional or soul-level connections, people often describe a push and pull dynamic. One person feels more, moves closer emotionally, while the other steps back to regain balance. But this stepping back is not always a sign of lack of care. More often, it is a response to emotional overload. When feelings become too strong, too fast, or too unfamiliar, the mind tries to protect itself by creating space. Not because the connection is meaningless, but because it feels overwhelming and hard to process all at once. In many cases, the person you feel distance from is not simply avoiding you. They may actually be avoiding the intensity of what they feel inside themselves. Strong emotional bonds can activate fears that were never fully resolved. Fear of losing control, fear of becoming too attached, fear of being hurt again, fear of not being enough for something that feels so deep. So instead of moving forward, they pause. They go quiet. They create emotional distance to process what is happening internally. And during this silence, the other person often becomes more anxious, more active emotionally, trying to bridge the gap. This is where the cycle begins. One steps back, the other reaches forward, and the imbalance continues unless something shifts inside the emotional pattern itself. The more pressure is created, even unintentionally, the more the withdrawing side feels the need to protect their space, not because they do not care, but because they are trying to regulate their emotions. And this is where understanding becomes important. Emotional connection does not always grow through pursuit. Sometimes it stabilizes through space. When urgency lowers, when emotional pressure reduces, the nervous system begins to settle. In that calmer state, clarity becomes easier. Feelings are no longer mixed with fear or confusion. Instead, there is room to actually understand what is real and what is reaction. This pause or distance is not necessarily the end of a connection. In many emotional dynamics, distance functions like a reset phase, a space where both individuals process their inner world separately. Old fears surface, old emotional patterns become visible, and slowly, awareness begins to grow. What once felt confusing starts to make more sense over time. The purpose of this space is not punishment or loss. It is transformation, a chance for emotional patterns to shift from fear-based reactions toward more stable understanding. So rather than seeing this distance as final, it can also be understood as a phase where both sides are unconsciously adjusting, healing, and preparing for a clearer emotional state ahead. The distance you are experiencing is not always a sign of rejection or lack of interest. In many emotional connections that feel deep or intense, distance can appear when feelings become too overwhelming to handle in a stable way. It is important to understand that strong emotional energy does not always move in a straight line. Sometimes it expands, then pulls back, like an invisible rhythm between two people. One person may feel everything strongly and try to move closer, while the other may suddenly become quiet or distant. But this silence is not always emptiness. Often it is an internal pause, a moment where the mind is trying to make sense of emotions that feel too powerful or unfamiliar. In many situations, the person who pulls away is not truly running from you as a person. They may be stepping back from the intensity of what they feel inside themselves. When emotions become too deep too quickly, it can create inner pressure. The heart feels pulled, but the mind feels unsafe. So the natural reaction is to create space. This space is not meant to destroy the connection, but to regulate it, to slow it down, to make it feel manageable again. And during this time, the other person often becomes more emotionally active, thinking more, feeling more, trying to understand more. This creates an imbalance where one energy moves forward and the other retreats. Not because of lack of care, but because of emotional overload on one side. This is where misunderstandings usually begin. Silence gets interpreted as disinterest. Distance gets interpreted as loss. But in reality, silence can also be a form of processing, a way for emotions to settle internally without external pressure. When someone feels too much at once, they may not have the words or clarity to express it properly. So instead of communicating, they withdraw temporarily. This withdrawal is not always a decision made against the connection. It is often a response to internal confusion, where feelings exist but are not yet organized in a way that feels safe to express. At the same time, the one who is more emotionally aware of the connection often feels this distance deeply and reacts by trying harder to reconnect. But emotional chasing, even when it comes from love, can sometimes increase the pressure in the dynamic. Not because love is wrong, but because intensity without balance can feel overwhelming to someone already in emotional retreat. When pressure rises, the instinct to withdraw can become stronger. This is how cycles form, not from lack of feeling, but from lack of emotional alignment in timing and expression. If there is one deeper understanding within all of this, it is that emotional connections often move through phases of closeness and space. Closeness builds awareness. Space builds reflection. Both are part of how people emotionally process deep bonds. What feels like separation may actually be part of emotional integration happening on both sides in different ways. And as time passes, if the connection is meaningful, both individuals often begin to understand themselves more clearly first, before they can understand each other fully.